François I'Olonnais. François I'Olonnais was so sadistic that Spanish sailors chose death over capture. The French pirate, whose real name was Jean-David Nau, tortured prisoners with methods brutal even by pirate standards, and by 1671, his reputation had made him both wealthy and hunted. But when an expedition to Nicaragua went disastrously wrong because of supply issues, L'Olonnais found himself lost in the jungles of the Gulf of Darien, near the border of Panama and Colombia. There, L'Olonnais and a small party encountered a group of indigenous Kuna people. He had terrorized Spanish colonists for years, but the Kuna had no fear of his reputation. They surrounded the pirates and attacked. According to Spanish colonial records, the Kuna captured L'Olonnais alive. What happened next was brutal even by the standards of the era. They tore him limb from limb, burned the pieces, and scattered the ashes. Some accounts claim they ate parts of his body, though this is disputed. No European witness survived, but Spanish authorities in the region confirmed L'Olonnais had been killed by indigenous people. His crew, hearing what happened, abandoned the expedition and fled. The pirate who had tortured hundreds died screaming in a jungle. Blackbeard. By November 1718, Edward Teach, known as Blackbeard, had pushed the Royal Navy too far. His blockade of Charleston had paralyzed colonial trade, and his raids across the Carolina coast had made him the priority target of Alexander Spotswood, Lieutenant Governor of Virginia. Word reached Spotswood that Blackbeard was anchored at Ocracoke Inlet, with only his ship the Adventure and a skeleton crew. Spotswood sent Lieutenant Robert Maynard with 2 warships to end him. On November 22, 1718, Maynard's ships entered the inlet. Blackbeard opened fire with cannons, killing several sailors and crippling one vessel. But Maynard had ordered most of his men to hide below deck. When Blackbeard sailed close to board what looked like a defeated ship, the hidden crew burst out and a brutal hand-to-hand fight erupted. Blackbeard and Maynard clashed directly. The pirate took 5 gunshot wounds and over 20 cuts from swords and knives. Even wounded, he kept fighting until a British sailor slashed his throat from behind. He collapsed, and moments later he was dead. Maynard ordered Blackbeard's head cut off and hung from the ship's bowsprit as proof. His body was thrown overboard. The head remained on display in Virginia for years. Blackbeard's death marked the beginning of the end for the golden age of piracy, and within a decade, most of the Atlantic's notorious captains were either captured or dead. Captain Kidd. William Kidd, known as Captain Kidd, had made a fatal miscalculation. The former privateer, commissioned by England to hunt pirates, had turned to piracy himself and seized the Quetta Merchant, an Armenian ship loaded with valuable cargo. But by 1699, believing he could negotiate a pardon, Kidd sailed to New York and surrendered to Lord Bellamy. But instead of mercy, he was arrested and shipped to England in chains to face trial. In May 1701 at the Old Bailey in London, the court accused him of piracy and the murder of his own gunner, William Moore, whom Kidd had killed with a bucket during an argument. Despite his protests that he had operated under legitimate commissions, the evidence against him was overwhelming. The jury found him guilty on all charges. On May 23, 1701, Kidd was taken to execution dock in Wapping. Thousands gathered to watch. As he stood on the gallows, the rope snapped on the first attempt, and Kidd crashed to the ground. Dazed and still alive, he was dragged back up and hanged a second time. This time, the rope held. His body was left hanging in a metal cage at the mouth of the Thames for 3 years. Every ship entering London passed beneath the rotting corpse of the man who had once been commissioned by the Crown to hunt pirates. Calico Jack Rackham. In October 1720, John Rackham, known as Calico Jack, was celebrating off the coast of Jamaica, his crew drunk on rum after recent victories. He had never been the most successful pirate, but he had become famous for 2 reasons: his distinctive skull and crossed swords flag, and his crew, which included Anne Bonny and Mary Red, 2 of the only known female pirates in history. But that fame made him a priority target for pirate hunter Jonathan Barnett, who appeared out of the darkness that very night. Barnett's heavily armed sloop closed in fast. Most of Calico Jack's men were too drunk to fight. According to testimony, only Anne Bonny and Mary Red came up to defend the ship, firing pistols and swinging swords, while the male crew cowered below deck. Bonny allegedly shouted at the men to come up and fight, but they refused. The battle was over in minutes, and Calico surrendered without resistance. He was taken to Spanish Town, Jamaica, and tried for piracy on November 16, 1720. The verdict was swift: guilty. Anne Bonny, who was his lover, was allowed to visit him in his cell before the execution. Her final words to him became legendary: "If you had fought like a man, you need not hang like a dog." On November 18, 1720, Calico Jack was hanged at Gallows Point in Port Royal. His body was placed in a metal cage and displayed on a small island at the entrance to Port Royal, later known as Rackham's Cay, where it hung for years. Blackbeard Roberts. By 1722, Bartholomew Roberts, known as Blackbeard, had captured over 400 ships in just 4 years and become the Royal Navy's most wanted man in African waters. The British Admiralty had spent months hunting him, and Captain Challoner Ogle, aboard the HMS Swallow, finally tracked him to Cape Lopez in present-day Gabon. Unlike most pirates, Roberts lived by a strict code and rarely drank, preferring tea over alcohol. But discipline couldn't save him from what was coming. On February 10, 1722, the Swallow appeared on the horizon. Bart, dressed in his finest crimson outfit with a diamond cross around his neck, ordered his crew to prepare for battle. As the ships closed in, he stood on deck directing his men. The Swallow fired a broadside. Grape shot tore across Roberts's deck, and one piece struck him in the throat. He died instantly, still standing in his finest clothes. His crew, seeing their captain dead, honored his final wish. Roberts had always said he would rather die in battle than hang. Before the British could board, his men wrapped his body in his ship's sail and threw him overboard. He sank to the bottom of the ocean, still wearing his diamond cross. The Swallow captured the rest of his crew shortly after. One of the most successful pirates of the Golden Age was gone, and with him went a major threat to British shipping in African waters. Stede Bonet. Stede Bonet had become a pirate for the strangest reason: to escape his nagging wife. The wealthy Barbados plantation owner bought a ship despite having no sailing experience, hired a crew that mocked him behind his back, and somehow survived long enough to raid the Carolina coast. His crew called him the Gentleman Pirate, though they questioned his every decision. But by September 1718, after sailing with Blackbeard and then striking out alone, Colonel William Rhett had been sent to hunt down the amateur, and Bonnet's luck was about to run out. Rhett found Bonnet's ship, the Royal James, hiding in the Cape Fear River. A 5-hour battle followed as both ships ran aground on sandbanks. Unable to maneuver, the crews fired at each other across the mud until the tide rose. When Bonnet's ship finally refloated, Rhett's was already in position. Outgunned and trapped, Bonnet surrendered. He was taken to Charleston and imprisoned. Despite being a gentleman, Bonnet received no special treatment. At his trial, he broke down, begging for mercy and weeping openly in court. The judge showed none. Bonnet and 29 of his crew were sentenced to hang. On December 10, 1718, Stede Bonet was hanged in Charleston, weeping and begging for his life until the rope silenced him. The man who became a pirate to escape his wife had found something far worse. Sam Bellamy. In April 1717, Samuel Bellamy was sailing toward Cape Cod with over 4.5 tons of gold and silver aboard the Whydah galley, more treasure than any pirate in history. At just 28 years old, Black Sam had become legendary in only 1 year of raiding. Unlike many pirates, Bellamy treated captured crews well and gave speeches about freedom and equality, earning him the nickname the Robin Hood of the Sea. But on the night of April 26th, as he allegedly sailed to visit a woman he'd left behind, a massive storm was building off the New England coast. Winds reached hurricane strength and massive waves battered the ships. Bellamy tried to navigate through the storm, but the Whydah was driven onto a sandbank near Wellfleet. The ship broke apart. Men screamed as they were thrown into the freezing water. Bellamy, along with approximately 144 of his crew, drowned in the waves. Only 2 men survived to reach shore. The wreck scattered treasure and bodies along the beach for miles. Local residents quietly collected coins and valuables that washed ashore for years. Bellamy's body was never identified among the dead. In 1984, the wreck was discovered off Cape Cod, making it the first authenticated pirate shipwreck ever found. Henry Every. Henry Every, also known as Henry Avery or Long Ben, pulled off one of the greatest heists in pirate history and then did something almost no other pirate managed. He disappeared completely. In 1695, he captured the Ganj I Sawai, a Mughal treasure ship, seizing what would be worth over $200 million today. The heist caused an international incident and made Every the most wanted man in the world, but he was never caught. After the raid, Every split the treasure with his crew and sailed to the Bahamas, where he reportedly bribed the governor for protection. From there, he vanished. Some crew members were eventually captured and hanged, but Every himself seemed to evaporate. Rumors spread across the Atlantic. Some said he had fled to Madagascar and set himself up as a pirate king. Others claimed he had gone to Ireland or Scotland and lived quietly as a wealthy gentleman. The English government offered massive rewards, but no one ever collected. The most credible account suggests Every returned to England in disguise and tried to sell his treasure quietly. But merchants he dealt with allegedly cheated him, taking his jewels and gold without paying. According to this version, Every died penniless in Devon around 1699, unable to retrieve his fortune without revealing his identity. But no grave was ever found and no confirmed sighting was recorded after 1696. Henry Every became a legend, the pirate who beat the system. While Blackbeard's head hung from a ship and Kidd rotted in a gibbet, Every simply walked away with the greatest treasure in pirate history. Whether he lived rich or died poor, he achieved what almost no other pirate could. He chose his own ending. If you like this video and want me to make more of them, please subscribe and leave a like.